Hi guys, it's me Chazza HD and welcome to another episode of the podcast where today we are going to review the events of yesterday's race at Imola for the 2025 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. A Grand Prix that I think delivered as much as it could have done. It was a great weekend. Qualifying was super close and very exciting, and the race, it was really competitive the whole way through. Obviously, we had the brilliant start to the race with a brilliant move made for the lead. And then outside of, say, first and second, brilliant fights throughout the entire field. Some great racing. Very exciting Grand Prix. And you didn't know how it was going to finish until really the very final lap. That's how a Grand Prix should be. It shouldn't be decided by the first lap or by the first pit stop. It should go down to the wire, and that's exactly how it was at Imola. So very good race weekend. It may unfortunately be the last weekend at Imola that we have for a while. If it is, sad to see it go. It's going to be replaced probably by a useless street circuit. We'll see what happens, but it was a cracking weekend at Imola, and let's get into the results of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, for the fourth time in a row, wins at Imola. Crucial win for his World Championship, just like it was a year ago when he won here. Absolutely massive, with an amazing move he made at the first couple corners. Second, Lando Norris. Third, Oscar Piastri, the championship leader, fails to win for the first time since the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. And then in fourth place, Lewis Hamilton. Fifth, the Williams, yet again for the second race in a row, of Alexander Albon. Brilliant race from him. Charles Leclerc sixth. George Russell seventh. Carlos Sainz in eighth. Isaac Hadjar, shout out to him. I thought he had a great weekend in ninth. And Yuki Tsunoda just about claiming the final point for Red Bull. Now, obviously, as usual, let's go on to the championship standings to see how this race affects things going forward. Oscar Piastri, of course, is still your championship leader, but the gap is cut down to now 13 points, and Max Verstappen, you can see, in third, a lot closer to the two McLarens, and he is very much in this title fight. George Russell fourth. At this point, too far away. Mercedes are going to have to bring a really big upgrade soon if they're going to get Russell to the point where he can start to mix it with the McLarens and Verstappen, because they're just too far away at this point. Charles Leclerc in fifth. Lewis Hamilton up to sixth in the championship after a brilliant comeback drive from 12th on the grid. Great comeback drive as well from both Ferrari cars, I must say, in the Grand Prix. Antonelli obviously had a DNF, down to 7th in the championship. Bad weekend for him. And then Alexander Albon, only 8 points behind Antonelli in 8th. What a season Albon is having. Just incredible what he's done this season. And then Esteban Ocon 9th, and Lance Stroll still in P10. And then on the constructor side, McLaren are about 150 or just over 150. Is it 150? No, sorry, 130. They're just over 130 points clear of Mercedes as they continue to waltz away in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes in second did not have a good weekend. Red Bull have closed the gap quite a lot from this weekend. They're only 16 points behind now. And then Ferrari are in fourth. Williams, very comfortable now in fifth, over 30 points clear of Haas in sixth. Aston Martin seventh. Racing Bulls, couple points for them. Keeps them in eighth, but puts them a bit closer to the couple teams ahead of them. And then Alpine ninth and Sauber in 10th. Now, one final thing that we always go on to is the race pace data from the Grand Prix that has just happened. And Red Bull, not by much, were the quickest team in the race at Imola. How much of that is Max Verstappen? I think quite a bit. I don't think the Red Bull car still was the fastest car. I still think the McLaren was the faster car. I think it was Max Verstappen, though, who made the difference over the course of the weekend and definitely in the race. So yeah, McLaren then second, Ferrari third, and only 0.3 of a second per lap off the pace of Red Bull. If only they were on the third row of the grid instead of the sixth row of the grid, they probably would have finished on the podium, considering what happened to Oscar Piastri, especially with him having bad tyres to finish the race. So even though it was a good comeback drive from, both Ferrari drivers, and Ferrari had good race pace, still, it could have been better if they had not messed up qualifying so bad. Mercedes, very disappointing. I thought they were in the race, half a second per lap off the pace of Red Bull and McLaren, pretty much. Williams, they were comfortably best of the rest and were mixing it with Mercedes on pace, only a 10.5 slower than the Silver Arrows. And then Aston Martin had a good weekend. Shame they didn't score any points. I think they really did deserve a points finish, but it just wasn't able to happen because Aston Martin messed up on strategy and then they weren't able to be in a good enough position to grab a point in the end. But it was a good weekend for them. Racing Bulls, second off the pace, but still able to get in the points. Again, great drive from Isaac Hadjar, who I'm very much a fan of at the moment. I really like the season he's had, and I hope he keeps it up. Sauber, pretty good pace in the race as well. Only slightly quicker than Alpine, who had a tough race at Imola. And then the slowest team, no surprise from what happened during the weekend. Haas, a couple tenths of a second slower than Racing Bulls, Sauber, and Alpine. So, as you can see in the midfield, pretty close. But that is the race pace data from the race at Imola. Let's now get into the teams and start with the race winners, Red Bull. Max Verstappen, though, I have to say, even though we're touching on Red Bull here, it's really Max Verstappen that we're going to be touching on, because he is the reason, not totally, but I'd say mostly the reason why Red Bull were able to win this weekend, because he is just on a complete different level to these other drivers. He was unbelievable this weekend. Putting on the front row in qualifying, could have maybe got on pole, but even putting on the front row and being as close to Piastri as he was such a great effort. And as I said in my race watch-along stream, going into the race, he had to get into the lead at the first couple corners. And going down to turn one wasn't looking good. Russell had a good start. Russell had got himself, I think, briefly up to second place. And then Max went round the outside of not just Russell, but Oscar Piastri, and pushed Piastri out. All fair and square. He kept it on track. He didn't push Oscar off the circuit with an absolutely incredible move. One of the best moves we've seen on the first lap at the first couple corners of a racetrack. Just incredible what he did, especially given how wide these cars are. It's very tricky to go side by side through the first couple corners without, having an incident with another driver. So to pull off the move he did so expertly was just incredible. I mean, you guys would have heard me during my race watch along. I could not quite believe what I had seen. It was incredible. And then after that, he absolutely dominated the race. Was helped to a degree by McLaren messing up Oscar Piastri's strategy, because Oscar, if he had stayed out, who knows whether he could have kept up to a degree with Verstappen and kept it a bit close. But once Oscar pitted, then all Max had to do was just manage the tyres at a good pace until, say, lap 25 to 30. So he could do the comfortable one-stop strategy. And that is what he ended up doing 2 pit stops in the end because there was a full safety car towards the end. But It was a comfortable race in the end, but like I said, he is the majority of the reason why Red Bull won this weekend. The Red Bull car definitely has got better, but the McLaren is still the best. I am still pretty sure of that. But it was Max Verstappen, as he does so many times, he made the difference. Just like he did back in Japan, last year in Brazil. That's why he's the world champion. Yes, he's had a very good car in these last few years, but even when the cars are on equal-ish footing, he is just too good. And that's why he wins so many races. Quick word on Yuki Tsunoda. P10, it's a decent result given that he started from the pit lane. But I am disappointed with his race weekend. Because like I said, Red Bull looked better at Imola. And I think given what happened to Ferrari and Antonelli in qualifying, I think Tsunoda could have ended up on the third row of the grid in qualifying had he not been, doing what he did in qualifying, which was a very poor mistake leading to a ginormous crash. Thankfully, he was okay from it at the Villeneuve chicane. So, yeah, decent drive, but I think he could have done a lot better this weekend. I think there was a lot more points on offer. Given that the Red Bull car was genuinely quite quick. So, I would say overall, still a bad weekend for Tsunoda. We'll see what he can do in Monaco, where he's been decent these last couple years. I think he's grabbed points in the last couple occasions at Monaco, so we'll see how he does. For Max Verstappen, though, regarding this weekend's race in Monaco, I don't think necessarily Max has to win this weekend. The Red Bull car won't be as strong at this Monaco track because the Red Bull goes better at higher speed tracks in terms of tracks that have higher speed corners. Monaco, has some of them, but a lot of slower and medium speed corners. So I am not expecting Red Bull to be as good as they were at Imola. But if Max is on top form, which he should be, there's no reason Max can't still get on the podium. And if he can get a podium finish, even if Piastri wins, I think that would still be a good result. Because at the Spanish Grand Prix, which is next week, I fully expect Red Bull to be very competitive around a circuit that car should be pretty good at. So, yeah, Max Verstappen, I think, has properly kicked off his championship bid now with this win at Imola. No doubt about that. But let's go on to the team he managed to beat, being McLaren, who could have absolutely done a lot better this weekend. Now, pole position they got. It was a great effort for Piastri after the amazing first sector Max did in qualifying in Q3. To start the lap. He did so well, Piastri, to recover the deficit and still only just by, I think, 0.03 of a second get pole. Lando Norris obviously had an awful qualifying, made up for it in the race. With Piastri, though, at turn one, he, as Nib, my co-commentator for the race yesterday, said, he had his pants pulled down at the start, at the first corner there. That was way too safe from him on the brakes. He really needed to take charge of that corner and absolutely command that piece of racetrack, and he did not. He allowed Max to at least go for it, and Max brilliantly pulled it off, and that really, again, won Max the race. After that, though, even though Piastri was 2 to 3 seconds off when he pitted and wasn't looking that great with his pace, I don't think McLaren gave him a fair enough chance to actually still come back out for Verstappen. They did pit him way too early. I think it was lap 12, lap 13, which if you're pitting that early, you're clearly doing a two-stop race. And at Imola, because of how much time you lose in the pit lane, which is about 28 seconds, you have got to be so incredibly quick to make a two-stop work compared to a one-stop that obviously Verstappen was going to do, and obviously Lando, his teammate, was going to do. And the reason it's so hard is because obviously of the traffic, and it has always been hard to overtake at Imola. Even with the smaller cars of 20 years ago, it was very hard to overtake at Imola. Look at, that battle with Alonso and Schumacher, famously 20 years ago. If you could overtake at Imola quite easily, Michael would have won that race in 2005, but you're able to, even if you haven't got a lot of pace, keep cars behind here at Imola. So yeah, that is why a two-stop just is not a good idea if you are obviously trying to win the race. But that's what they went for. Piastri, I think, did a good job coming through the field and making up for it, but it was the wrong decision. And Oscar was never going to win the race. And then with the virtual safety car, that just absolutely screwed Oscar in terms of finishing in second place. But even with a safety car that came out towards the end, that hurt Oscar once again because he wasn't able to pit for new tyres because he had already pitted twice. And, if McLaren had not put him on a two-stop strategy, he would have had tyres for the end there and maybe could have finished himself in second place. But that's the way it is. Third is still, I wouldn't say a good result, but it's good enough considering he wasn't able to win. It's not a bad result by any means, but he does have to win, I think, this weekend now, just to keep the others, far enough away, because he doesn't want to be allowing Max Verstappen to develop loads of momentum. So I think Oscar absolutely, again, has to win this weekend. We'll see if he can. McLaren, I think, should have the fastest car. I think it's very well built for a track like Monaco. So yeah, I'd be surprised if anyone can beat McLaren, but we'll see how it goes. For Lando Norris, for once, he had an actual good race. 2 brilliant overtakes. One on George Russell at the Villeneuve chicane, an overtake that I have not seen before, right round the outside, and then had the inside line for the second part of it. Brilliant move. And then the move he did on Piastri as well, round the outside at turn 1. So, in the race, absolutely brilliant. But again, qualifying, where he should be at his best, he absolutely failed to deliver with what was 2 poor efforts in Q3. His first lap was 3 tenths off the pace, I think, or a couple tenths or so off the pace of his teammate. It ended up being 3 tenths off the pace because his final lap in Q3, he failed to improve and was 6 tenths of a second slower. Just nowhere near good enough from Lando. And that's why Lando could not fight for the victory this weekend, because he put himself in too low a position to fight for it. You have to be, if you want to win the race at Imola, you've got to be on the front row, really. There are the odd instance where someone from third has had an amazing start and got into the lead at first corner. Max Verstappen did that in 2021. Ralf Schumacher did it in 2001 for Williams. Obviously, the starting grid was a bit further forward back then. So, it's not impossible that you can win the race from, say, third, but obviously Lando was down in fourth. So, it was always going to be pretty much impossible for Lando to win the race. And that's why, even though his pace was good and the overtakes he did was great, it only resulted in second place, when really Lando had to win this weekend to really, I feel, turn around his championship bid. Because even though he beat Piastri yesterday, he still, ends up coming away from this race weekend disappointed, as he should be. And, continuously coming away from race weekends disappointed is something that he's been doing ever since the second Grand Prix of the season in Shanghai, which was, 2 months ago now. So that disappointed feeling is only going to continue. But I will say, even though I've criticised Lando quite a lot this season, full credit for the race performance. He was as good as he could have been. 2 brilliant overtakes, good pace. But again, he ruined his race win chances by finishing, where he did in qualifying. In regards to this weekend at Monaco, very important race for Lando. I don't think necessarily has to win the race. If Oscar, his teammate, wins, I don't think that's necessarily the end of the world because Lando is only 13 points behind. I think Lando, though, if Oscar does win, Lando must finish in second place. Or even third is, it's not the end of the world. He has got to make sure, though, he does not do what he did at Imola. Because if he does that again in Monaco and ends up outside the top 3 on the grid, he has pretty much no chance of being able to make that up. Because obviously in Monaco, you can't overtake. And even with the mandatory 2-stop race that they are having in Monaco, I don't think that's really going to make a difference either. So, has to get it right on the Saturday. Because if he doesn't, again, he will be losing a lot of points. So, got to make sure he is at least on the podium in Monaco. But yeah, McLaren failed to win. Not great, but they just need to focus on this next Grand Prix and make sure that they win in Monaco. They cannot afford to not win the Monaco Grand Prix. The next team, though, we're going to go on to is a team that had an incredibly topsy-turvy weekend, and that is the Scuderia Ferrari team. Home race, one of their home races at Imola, of course. A lot was expected and hoped for coming into this race, and ultimately failed to deliver. Qualifying was absolutely horrific. They were 0.6 of a second slower with their lap time compared to what they did last year. Last year, Leclerc at best did a 1:14.9 in qualifying. In in qualifying this past weekend, it was a 1:15.5, I think, or a 1:15.6, something like that. It was absolutely diabolical what happened in qualifying. And, Frederick Vasseur came out after the qualifying session and said, we failed to execute. I still have my doubts about that. I just don't think Ferrari in qualifying had good pace. Clearly, though, in the race, were a lot quicker. And if only, like I said earlier, if they had started on the third row of the grid, I think Ferrari would have finished on the podium. And really, given they're already out of the championship fight on both the constructors and drivers' side, third, at least, was what they needed, really, from this Grand Prix to give them some sort of confidence and also deliver something for the home crowd. Yeah, it was a great comeback drive from both drivers, but no podium yet again for the Scuderia, who somehow have had only one podium in the first 7 races. And I'm not counting the sprint races, obviously, because they don't really matter at all. That is pathetic from Ferrari. In terms of the drivers, Lewis Hamilton, great to see him having a really good race. He was very happy with the race he had. He does also, I saw some of his comments post-race, he does feel like he is more comfortable now with the car. Good to hear. He was only 1/10 of a second away from his teammate in qualifying, which is, in terms of how he did compared to Leclerc, I don't think you could really blame Lewis whatsoever for what happened in qualifying. He did, I think, good enough as a driver. The car just was not quick enough with both drivers. Leclerc, I do kind of feel sorry for, because he did not pit under the safety car. Lewis Hamilton did. And that's really why Hamilton finished 4th ahead of Leclerc, who finished down in 6th. But even if they had finished 4th and 5th, again, still disappointing. Because, being that quick in the race is all, great, but where was it on Saturday? Because if they had delivered that on Saturday, they probably would have finished on the podium. Again, which would have been something for Ferrari. And yeah, 4th and 6th, that's what they come away with, which is still just not good enough as far as I'm concerned. And even though the race may have given some hope to the Scuderia and to the Tifosi, that's quickly going to be extinguished because Imola actually suits, I think, the Ferrari car a bit more than the next track we're going to this weekend in Monaco, where I think Ferrari are at serious risk of being, I wouldn't say super low down on the grid, but I think they will be in the midfield. I don't see them anywhere near the front of the field. I think McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull definitely will be ahead of them. And given how quick they are at the moment, I think Williams, you've got to say, probably will be right there with Ferrari, if not ahead. Given their pace at the moment, especially in qualifying compared to Ferrari. So Ferrari, there is a pretty high chance, I think, given their car right now, that they will only be able to probably get one car into Q3. But there is a decent chance they'll, not get any cars into Q3, just like what happened here at Imola. And if that does happen, even if they've got much better race pace, again, in Monaco, you can't do anything with that. So qualifying is going to be very tricky for this team. And if it ends up being as bad as it possibly could be, they're going to struggle to score a point in Monaco. I don't have any real hopes for them. Obviously, for the Spanish Grand Prix, which is next week, I think Ferrari do have an upgrade coming for that Grand Prix, plus the technical directive that was announced at the start of the season comes into force at that race. So maybe things will turn around there. But this weekend in Monaco, I don't see it being good if you're a Ferrari fan. So brace yourself for what could be probably the worst weekend Ferrari have had in Monaco for a long time. Probably not even in the last 10 years, probably in the last 30 to 40. It could be really bad. So yeah, please brace yourself if you're a Ferrari fan. Mercedes we'll quickly touch on. A real shame about their weekend. Russell had a great qualifying, getting up into third, was only a tenth and a half away from pole. I thought it was a super effort from George Russell. But in the race, clearly there was something wrong with his car because he had absolutely no pace. And Mercedes in general, they did not have really that much pace. Half a second a lap to lose to Red Bull and McLaren, pretty much. That's a lot around a short track like Imola. So yeah, Mercedes, really bad in the race. I think Russell, I wouldn't say had a good result, finishing in 7th, but I think given the issues he had, I think he did the absolute best he could with what he was having to manage in that car. So still a good drive, but clearly, yeah, there was something wrong there. And then for Antonelli, was looking like it was going to be a good race after the virtual safety car that he was able to capitalise on, and he ended up coming out in, I think, 5th or 6th place. But obviously ended up with a DNF for the young Italian. Of course, this was the first of his home races. The next one will be at Monza in September. Antonelli, though, not a good enough weekend. Qualifying was poor. He really should have been in the top 5 in qualifying, given where his teammate was. And then in the race, even though, yeah, he had a DNF, I still feel as though he could have done better. So, yeah, there is still... I still feel like there is quite a bit more there for Antonelli to find. It was not the best of weekends. In Monaco, though, I'm very intrigued to see how Antonelli does. I think, in terms of the race, as long as he finishes in the top 6, I think that would be good enough from Kimi. For Mercedes, though, I genuinely think they'll be very quick. George Russell was very quick in Monaco last year, was not that far from pole in what was a much worse car last year. And every single time in Monaco, Russell has been, pretty quick. So watch out for George Russell. He, I think, is a possible dark horse for pole position. So, yeah, keep an eye on him. He really could spring a big surprise. And I do think that Mercedes car in Monaco will be better than it was at Imola, no doubt. So, yeah, we'll see how they get on. But if they could at least get a podium, I think this weekend in Monaco, I think that would be good enough. Because, yeah, championship-wise, I think they're just too far away at this point. And the car clearly is not getting, at the moment, any better to the point where they can fight for race wins. So yeah, a podium this weekend would be definitely a good result for Mercedes and especially George Russell. And finally, before we end this podcast, of course, we must talk about Williams yet again, who were absolutely, I would say, a front-running team. They were mixing it with Ferrari and Mercedes and had a great weekend, even though it still could have been better. In qualifying, 6th and 7th, great result. Even though it still should have been better, they probably should have locked out the third row of the grid if they had unlocked the full potential of the car in Q3. But still, great result. Carlos Sainz, I still think, is getting better. And he's definitely getting consistent now with that Williams, as we've seen in qualifying these last 3 races. He's definitely improving. And by the way, for any Carlos Sainz fans out there, Imola was the 3rd race in a row where he's out-qualified Lewis Hamilton, who of course replaced him at Ferrari. So I know you Sainz fans will love that. But the race, I have to feel sorry for Carlos because he, again, like Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, was screwed over by his team, pitting him way too early onto a 2-stop strategy. And even on the radio, once he was being told the lap times of his teammate, he discovered upon himself that his teammate was doing a 1-stop strategy, and he knew that he was screwed in terms of being able to get, so the best result he could possibly get from the race. So, yeah, feel sorry for Sainz because I think he could have got at least a couple positions higher in the race. He ended up finishing 8th, which is still, that's still a good result. But it feels like Miami. It could have been still better. For Alex Albon, though, even though his result could have been better, he really should have finished in 4th place. Should have Albon. Maybe even 3rd. If he had got past Leclerc quick enough, he could have maybe put Piastri under pressure, who was on quite old tyres. But another top 5. Brilliant drive. Brilliant pace. Obviously, eventually was able to get past Leclerc at the end when Leclerc, I think rightly, was told to let Albon through. I know there's been some debate that, Leclerc didn't do anything wrong. As far as I'm concerned, Leclerc did not try to leave Albon any space and, forced him off the circuit. So, I don't think Ferrari got it wrong in terms of telling him to let Alex through. So, Albon absolutely had a great race, and even though he had a great race, deserved, I think, still a bit more. Like I said, 4th place, really, he should have got. 3rd even was on offer. But what a season Alex Albon is having. I legit, even though I've continuously praised this guy in the last 2 to 3 years for so many great qualifying and race performances in the Williams, given now that he's got a proper representative teammate, and in this car that is, a lot better than some of the Williams cars we've seen him drive, I am just astounded by how good he's been. He is only 8 points behind Antonelli in a Mercedes. He's only, I think, less than 20 points behind Leclerc in the Ferrari. Just, again, unbelievable season he's having. He's actually now beaten Leclerc 2 races in a row and scored, I think, 20 points in the last 2 races when Leclerc has scored, I think, 14. So, what a season Alex is having, and I hope he keeps this up. He has been easily one of the top 5 best drivers on the grid this season. And let's see if he keeps this up, and let's see if Williams can keep up their stunning performance as well. And definitely, I think in Monaco, they will be very, very quick. So watch out for Williams. I think they could be quite clearly the surprise team in Monaco. I wouldn't be surprised if, if they have both cars in the top 10. But do look out for them, especially in Q3, because I think a top 5 might be possible for them. Might be a bit, stretched too far, but we'll see. But I think a top 5 might be possible for Williams. But I think both cars into Q3, absolutely, is something that they should be aiming for and probably should be getting. So yeah, cannot wait to see Williams in Monaco. But another great race weekend for them, and good to see them so good after a few years of difficulties. But guys, that is it for this podcast reviewing the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. And the plan, content-wise, coming up for the next week is pretty simple. This Saturday, I will be live at 1:30 p.m. UK time to do my qualifying watch-along covering, of course, one of the most anticipated sessions of the year, qualifying in Monaco. So make sure to join for that. But I will not be doing a race watch-along because, as we know, overtaking Monaco is impossible. And even though they've mandated a 2-stop race, I think we all know that's not going to make a difference. So there will not be a race watch-along. But, of course, the day after the Monaco Grand Prix, I will be doing a podcast reviewing what happened over the course of the weekend. So if you want to hear my thoughts on what I thought of the race and all of that, make sure to check out the podcast next Monday, the day after the Monaco Grand Prix. So that's the plan for the next week or so. Hopefully you guys can come along and check out that content. But guys, thanks for coming along for this bit of content. Make sure to smash the like button before you go and subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until my qualifying stream this Saturday at 1:30 p.m. UK time, 90 minutes before qualifying in Monaco gets underway. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.